Bizarro is a doppelganger of Superman. Due to a somewhat disjointed continuity, several versions of Bizarro have appeared in DC comic books, all of them in versions of Superman with gray or chalk-white skin, a twisted sense of logic which typically manifests as a superficial opposite of anything Superman would do or say, and a resultant speech pattern. "Me I'm going to kill you" would mean "I will save you" in Bizarro speech. Due to his imperfections, Bizarro is frequently a foe of Superman, but sometimes finds himself in the role of hero, in this case, an anti-hero. It has been suggested by both comic book fans and anthropologists that the Bizarro character, who is the opposite of Superman and all he stands for, was a metaphor for the Soviet Union at a time when Superman was seen as the embodiment of the United States in the 1950s. The Soviet reference was likely akin to the fact that the USSR was aesthetically prominent in events like the Olympics and had a military that made great contributions to winning the Second World War, but in civilian life many aspects of the Soviet economy were dysfunctional. The original Bizarro was created when Superman was exposed to a duplicate ray. In accordance with the science fiction concepts of Superman stories of the era, Bizarro relocated to the Bizarro world, a cubical planet called Trey which operated under Bizarro logic. It was a crime to do anything good or right, and which Bizarro populated with inverted versions of Superman's supporting cast and other DC
cause massive
heroes.
havoc in Metropolis in an
The
attempt to emulate
1986
Superman.
event Crisis
She would also
on
fall in
Infinite
love with
Earths
Lois Lane,
rewrote
to which she
DC's
would end up
continuity,
help creating Bizarro
eliminating
Lois,
Trey.
and the two would end up together,
Since
falling
then,
in love,
two
leaving
Bizarro
Earth in the attempt to
characters
find
have
a new
appeared,
home.
one of them a
Sometime
flawed
later,
clone
Superman would end
created
up
by
finding
Lex
them and
Luthor.
discover that they once again
The second, longer-lasting Bizarro, was an idea of the Batman villain the Joker, brought to life by the cosmic trickster Mr. MXYZPTLK. Bizarro has been a consistent enemy of Superman since his first appearance. Faithful adaptations of Bizarro appeared in the animated series Super Friends and series in the subsequent DC universe. Also, doppelgangers of Superman with some attributes of Bizarro appeared in live-action adaptations. Bizarro and the Bizarro world have become somewhat well known in popular culture, and the term Bizarro is used as to describe anything that utilizes twisted logic or that is the opposite of something else. Bizarro has chalky and sometimes rock-like skin, a pale complexion, and a misshapen face. While the original Bizarro costume was identical to Superman's, he later changed it to one with a reversed S shield so he could be even more imperfect. Subsequent modifications to the costume have included a dented belt buckle and poorly fitting boots, although these modifications weren't consistent between stories. Bizarro wears a medallion that says, Bizarro number 1, in order to distinguish himself from the other Bizarros on Trey. Bizarro and the other inhabitants of the Bizarro world used an odd but predictable form of English. The most notable characteristics were the lack of nominative case when using pronouns. Bizarro replaces pronouns that should be nominative with their analogues in the accusative case. Bizarro might introduce himself by saying, "Me am Bizarro," instead of, "I am Bizarro," for example. The lack of proper verb conjugation. Bizarro only uses the first-person conjugation for any verb. For example, the verb is always conjugated as am, leading to sentences like, "This am great," speaking the opposite of what is really meant in a situation. Thus, "this am great" would mean that the thing isn't great at all. The exception would be "me am Bizarro," which would actually mean what was said. Just like Superman, his clone known as Bizarro also has several powers and a few weaknesses. However, because it is a figure that in many cases is highlighted as being the opposite side of the hero, his powers end up having some opposite variations as well. While the Man of Steel has heat vision, Bizarro has Arctic vision, which, as the name implies, emits a powerful amount of cold steam from its eyes, as well as shooting beams of ice from them. The opposite also happens with the breath. While Superman's is cold, his clone's is known as the flame breath. It turns out that it can produce and spray superheated plasma or liquid from its mouth through exhalation. In turn, Bizarro's main weakness also comes from a material that has been affecting Clark Kent in his stories for a long time: kryptonite. However, while Superman becomes weaker with green kryptonite and stronger with blue, the opposite happens with his clone. Blue kryptonite proved fatal to Bizarro. Exposure to blue kryptonite radiation takes away Bizarro's strength, and prolonged exposure could end up killing him. Meanwhile, green kryptonite manages to make you even stronger. Originally, this Bizarro's abilities were the same as Superman's, but in homage to his pre-crisis counterpart, this Bizarro also developed reverse powers as well as adding things like X-ray hearing and spotlight vision. Instead of possessing heat vision and freeze breath like Superman, he has freeze vision and flame breath, the latter
and
recently
created
shown
by
in
businessman Lex
Batman/Superman
Luthor.
number
Burns'
22,
version of Bizarro
Globe,
is more
MCC
bestial, much
Guinness,
like the
Vines.
Mary Shelley original Frankenstein
He has also
monster.
been discovered
He
to be
barely
physically more
speaks, instead
powerful than
communicating through
Superman,
guttural
but the
grunts
nature
and
of his
flinging of
fractured
his
mind
fists.
leaves
He
him
did
unable
display
to
some
access
intelligence.
that
He knew
potential.
that he had a secret identity and went out of his
Post-crisis,
way to
Bizarro
save
has
Lois Lane's
encountered
sister
blue
Lucy after she
kryptonite
had jumped
on
off
two
of a building
occasions.
because she had been rendered blind.
The
But much
first
like the
was
original
pre-Infinite
Bizarro,
Crisis
he wouldn't stick
Bizarro
around.
presented him
Bizarro
with a
would be
ring
killed at
set
the end
with
of
a
the story
stone
by
of it,
clashing with Superman with a tremendous
Batman/Superman
force,
number
turning him into
25.
powder. In another callback to the
The ring
original story,
caused
this
Bizarro
Bizarro
to
powder
speak
would restore
normally
Lucy
and
Lane's
act
vision.
rationally,
Bizarro
as well
wouldn't
as
appear
granting
again
him
until
a
the
12th
mid-90s
level
following the
intellect.
death and return of
The effect seems to be the opposite of the expected outcome. Instead of killing this Bizarro, it has the imperfect effect of making him intelligent. Still, he feared the ring. The ring appeared to have no effect on Bizarro since he is a Batman clone. Post-Infinite Crisis, Luthor created a version of blue kryptonite that affects Bizarro just like green kryptonite affects Superman. Action Comics Annual number 10. As of Action Comics number 845, Bizarro has learned how to speak more normally by watching television for 13 months. As a result, he no longer negates the meaning of every possible word in the sentence and now speaks almost exactly like his pre-crisis self.